All right, Mtunzi again, and today we're talking creation versus evolution. And you might even ask yourself, why is it important for us to know the difference between the two? Well, it's so simple and direct. When we subscribe to the model of creation, we're actually promoting ethics as well as character and responsibility, because we are saying that there's an ultimate being, an all-knowing being which is responsible for all of our existence. And we were to examine that further and research and study to realize that our existence is nothing more than an illusion, because we are nothing more than imaginations of this one entity which we have come to know as God. And what we consider to be creation is nothing more than the reflection or a study of this imagination as it evolves. So evolution and creation fit into the same criteria, because creation has to evolve. In other words, it has to proceed. And so for anything with energy to exist, it must vibrate. In other words, the vibration will be its proceedings or its evolution. And so creation as well as evolution do not clash, except for there seems to be a conspiracy to do away with God so that we can assume further or deal better with our guilty conscience. The reasons for this may vary from the fact that the civilization we live under was developed by whites using violence, among other things. And so it's common for human beings to harbor a sense of guilt. And so to do away with it and thus promote similar conditions would be to do away or disqualify the notion of God, so that scientists and Westerners can always come up with solutions for every problem they cause. And so let's continue with creation before we move on to evolution. The idea of creation is in such that God designs a particular universe for a particular purpose. In other words, every universe is designed to experiment with certain attributes of God. And this God is made up of 144,000 qualities. And these become our physical bodies. In other words, we have insight, which is a spirit, as well as honesty, kindness, love, understanding, wisdom, greatness, perfection, etc. And these would in turn have their physical counterparts in the form of human organs. And externally, these will be represented by plants as well as animals. So in order for us to end up having unnatural animals such as pigs, flies, mosquitoes, etc., there must be a deviation in consciousness rather than an evolution. And so we're saying that there are only 144,000 perfect prototype plants as well as animals, and that all others have evolved from them as soon as man changed in terms of his spiritual disposition. In other words, as perfect beings, we're able of creating animals from our own images, from our own attributes and characters. And so creation, as I was saying, is nothing more than the product of imagination. And so this creation must also evolve. For instance, if I was to create a tiny plant, the plant will have an assignment, which is to grow. And its growth will be its evolution. And so evolution, as I was explaining earlier on, does not exclude creation, and creation does not exclude evolution. The only difference is in ideologies as well as different schools of thought. For instance, if we were to study quantum physics, you'll finally realize that physical science as we know it was outdated in the 1920s. This was due to the fact that scientists discovered that the universe was expanding, that it must have had a beginning. Prior to that, even major scientists like Einstein believed that the universe was, in fact, Einstein came up with a theory which he called cosmological, what did he call it again? The cosmological constant. In his view, the universe had always been there, more like someone would find a house in the forest and assume that the house had built itself. What I'm trying to explain here is that without philosophy, we often misplace and misuse our minds. So whether we're dealing with science or any other study, the basic tool or equipment that is always in use is the mind. And we're not dealing with the mind, we're dealing with consciousness. And so science often makes a mistake of using physical instruments and neglecting the mind itself, forgetting the fact that the rest of us do have minds to think and question, and as well as do our own researches. And because nothing will ever be new on earth, everything we'll ever study and learn was always known. It's just that it was either unknown to us or there were many other reasons behind it. And so evolution explains that all life came by accident from a Big Bang, and that this Big Bang eventually created consciousness, among other things, and that we also have an assignment to ascend consciously until we can become that which we all know as God. But the truth of the matter is that matter evolves from knowledge. In other words, matter as we know it is an illusion of our senses, because everything is consciousness, and consciousness is not physical, and consciousness only deals with knowledge and information. And so the theory of evolution is usually based, or I can say it's misguided and based on ignorance, or it seeks to do away with the main thing, which is consciousness. Suppose the idea is to create scarcity, because with the scarcity, you can charge people and you can